Hey everybody, welcome to r/Tales from Tech Support, where we get to have a little chuckle at the technologically disadvantaged. I'm Uncle Reddit, and have I got a story for you. We didn't pay for the flux capacitor, aka liar liar pants on fire. I supported a sales system where the sales reps would work up their quotes and then submit for approval and processing. The orders the reps did were bulk orders, usually over 100,000. And frequently over 300,000, so you'd think they would take time to double check the details. The business model was to list all items on the order at the MSRP, manufacturer's suggested retail price, and have any negotiated discount rolled up in a sale discount, line with the amount for the discount on the entire sale. I received a ticket one day that the system had failed to copy the discount amount on the sales discount line on one of the quotes to the resulting order. This was the first and only report we had of this type of system error, so I suspected the rep was lying. Without going into all the details, between the audit trail and timing of the test environment data refresh, I was able to prove conclusively that the rep had left the discount amount at $0 on the quote until after the order had been invoiced. He had changed the quote after the resulting order had been completed and closed. We should have locked the quotes down once they had been submitted, approved, and pushed through, but the business said we needed to keep the quotes editable for reasons. The sales rep had just flat out forgotten to fill in the discount amount he had agreed upon with the customer and then tried to blame the system. I took all the information to my boss. He told me to summarize my findings in an email to 2 levels of reps, hierarchy, and himself, my boss, and closed the ticket with "No system defect found." I made sure to keep a backup copy of all my screenshots, etc., buried in my CYA folder. I can't say that I recall for sure what happened, but I don't think he was with the company for too long after that. Word actually got around pretty quick amongst the reps that blaming their mistakes on the system wasn't going to work. Hey listen, I get it man, I understand it's hard to own up and admit your mistakes. We all make mistakes, flubs, forget things, whatever. But to start blaming the system or a coworker or your boss or, whatever, yeah, that never turns out well. SolidWorks and a company's shared drive. Thought that said SolidWorks for a second. I'm not sure if this story would qualify as tech support, but might as well. Recently, I interned at an electronics production company where I was assigned to the engineering department, mechanical design, wiring, jig maintenance, etc. Around the same time I got into the company, a woman about my age, we'll call her Tiffany, also started working interning there. Tiffany was a pretty capable and diligent worker, and our coworkers there were really fond of her. Like, really fond. The story starts a month into our internship when our supervisor, Carl, handed us separate design tasks using SolidWorks. This task was put on top of our regular jig and machine maintenance at the production line, so we were quite busy that day. I got, presumably, one of the easier out of the 2 design tasks. Carl gave us instructions on how he wanted the structures to be and told us of design elements we would use that were already in the company's shared drive for parts that the company readily had. So the both of us went to work on the projects in the morning while still helping out the engineers in the production line. Granted that the projects were fairly simple, we were told to have the designs available by tomorrow morning to show to the project manager. Around lunchtime, I noticed Tiffany had started to take a few available parts from the workshop as reference. At the time, I merely thought nothing of it because I knew she was competent enough to do her work and continued with my own work. At around 5, my work was nearly done and I was stretching myself when I turned around to see a frustrated Tiffany massaging her head facing her monitor. I decided to initiate some small chat and ask her if her work was okay. Me, you doing okay there? Tiff, I would be if there weren't so many gosh darn parts in this project. Puzzled, I decided to look at her monitor to see how her progress was going. There, staring blankly at me in the face, was a custom screw cap that was a usual sighting in the company. Me, what about the parts? Tiff, I wish Carl just gave us the 3D models for these parts. That's when I realized what she had been doing for the past working day. She had been making the 3D models for each and every part that was going into the project, including the ones that were already available in the company drive. Me, He did give them. Tiff, what do you mean? Me, they're in the company drive. Tiff, what company drive? She seemed bewildered when I started to navigate to the company drive on her PC. When I clicked on the file with the 3D models, she stared blankly at them for a good minute before putting her face in her hands. For her project, there were around 15 parts that she could have gotten from the company drive, like screws, caps, nozzles, etc. For every minute of the working day, she had worked on every single one of them from scratch, and had barely started on the main structure. Holy cow. Tiffany then continued her work with a smullen face, using the available 3D models, while I finished up on my work, when it was nearing the end of my shift. Tiffany had no choice but to work overtime to finish her task. I initially decided to leave on time to meet with some friends, but later thought to cancel my plans and also work overtime to help her out. Later I went out for a late dinner with her, and she explained how she had no idea what the company drive was, ignored it, and merely continued with work. So that's basically the whole story and how I got my first girlfriend. Aww. Well, good for you, OP. You did a good deed, you got a girlfriend out of the deal, and she got to keep her internship. Yay! A different kind of printer problem. This was around 15 years ago when my department moved into a new building. New was a matter of opinion. It happened to be a rather old building, but it was nicer than the temporary building we previously occupied. We set up our IT office and repair bench with the standard array of monitors, laser printers, tools, bins for parts, you know the drill. It was well known that this building had a few HVAC quirks, but nothing terribly uncomfortable. Except our room. It was freezing. We all had to wear coats all the time. Maintenance paid several visits to try and figure it out, but the air conditioning in the building was confusing. It was central, mostly, but some rooms could control to some extent. Our room had controls, but no matter what we set, the ghost in the machine decided that our room needed to be at least 10 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit colder than everywhere else. Months went by, and we more or less just got used to it. We had this big honkin' laser printer in our room. It was old, but it could print 11 by 17 color, so we kept it alive with whatever we had available. On this fateful day, I unplugged it and pulled it away from the wall to work on the duplex attachment in the back, and noticed a small box on the wall, no bigger than a deck of cards, hidden behind the printer. It had no markings nor controls, but it had a small grill in the plastic. Whatever. After 15 minutes or so, I noticed that the air coming through the HVAC vents wasn't cold anymore. I finished up with the printer, plugged it in, rolled it back into place, and a test print reminded me that I'm good at my job. And then the cold air started flowing again. If you haven't yet pieced this puzzle together, I'll bring you to the punchline. Laser printers, particularly old ones, generate a lot of heat exhaust, which is blown out the back of the unit, right onto that box on the wall, which turned out to be the room's HVAC thermometer sensor. We moved the printer 6 feet away against another wall, and within a day, our room was back to normal operating temperatures. Okay, I'm really surprised maintenance didn't catch that one. You know, I've been in some older buildings where most stuff is marked or should be marked, thermostat. And, you don't have to say thermostat. I mean, most people know what a thermostat looks like, but it'll be labeled like, thermostat zone 1, 2, whatever. What a certain wall switch is for. Sometimes they're for a totally different area. Certain outlets will be labeled. I mean, I built buildings for years. A lot of times outlets will be labeled with their particular circuit so that you can trace things back and figure out where you're having electrical issues. So I'm really surprised there wasn't some sort of labeling there, or the maintenance didn't have any idea that this little box was there. Very odd. Network cutting out at 9 in the morning. This was back in the 80s, when offices weren't designed with network cabling in mind. Network and banyan vines were battling it out, and you could still smoke in the office. I had a user in the office portion of our warehouse, definitely didn't have cabling in mind when it was built, whose network connection started cutting out between 9 and 9:10 a.m. every morning, starting in November. Sometimes it would come back, sometimes it wouldn't. It was really weird. I swapped the NIC with a known good one, mine. My unit stayed connected while the users continued to cut out. I swapped out the CPU, I rebuilt her hard drive, and loaded and reloaded drivers downloaded from CompuServe at $1 million a minute. And no go. Until one morning I was at her desk, waiting for the network connection to die, when I watched a coworker walk in. He started later than everyone else at 9 o'clock, and hang his coat on the coat rack next to the door. And a few moments later, the connection dropped. I looked at the coat rack, then looked at the floor, and noticed a network cable under one of the legs of the coat rack. I managed to lift the rack just enough to slide the cable out from under the rack, and the connection came back up. It seems the 6th coat on the rack was just enough to pull the cable out of the nearby rack and drop her connection. Oh my god. Just to be safe, I replaced her cable and anchored it to the baseboard with antenna clips. Never had a problem again. Oh my gosh, you rebuilt all that stuff and kept working on her computer, and the whole time it was that one cable. Whoops. Government puts tax dollars to good use in high security tech setup. So I'm the sole IT person for a small-ish environmental engineering firm. Our company also manages several wastewater plants for counties and townships. There is one particular plant that uses a SCADA system to control plant equipment and functions. This system uses TCP Modbus to interface between the HMI PC and the PLC. I should note, TCP Modbus generally does not implement encryption or even authentication. As such, the actual Modbus decides who should generally be on their own network without any direct connection to the internet, and that only contains devices that need to be on said network. The first time I went to this plant, I was called out for some simple tech support stuff. Can't remember what exactly. I was told to look over the networking while I was there, and see if all was good. When I got there, I noticed that their main router/firewall was one built into the modem. Not ideal, but no biggie. I asked how I should connect my laptop to the network, and was told to connect to the unsecured Wi-Fi network. Obviously, this was a bit alarming to me, so I asked why they had a completely open network. The response I got was that there was a dog pound next door that needed internet, so the county stuck an outdoor AP to the side of the building and pointed it there, and didn't even have the bright idea to put a password on it. I then set about trying to temporarily hobble together some old routers to at least keep our plant behind a firewall from this network, until I could figure out something more proper. As I was swapping cables around, a gentleman came into the plant, somewhat frustrated, saying that internet at the airport had gone down. I said, "I'm not sure, we're a wastewater plant. You should check with your ISP." He then informed me that, actually, there was a P2P Wi-Fi bridge on the roof that connected the airport to our network. Apparently the county was too cheap to buy them all their own internet, so they threw together a way for us all to share one connection, and just hooked it all into the provided cable modem/router. Oh boy. I was already horrified, but then when continuing my work I discovered the SCADA system was on the same network that all three entities were sharing. Let me remind you, the Modbus used implemented no authentication or encryption. You just sent commands to it over TCP/IP, and it executed them. So any dip-S with a laptop that was close enough to connect to the unsecured long-range outdoor AP could theoretically connect up and start sending it commands. Now obviously they won't know what address goes to what equipment, but if you just say turn on all the coil registers, used to control relays, you would most definitely cause something really bad to happen. I eventually was able to sort it out and do proper networking, but still. Oh, also the SCADA HMI PC was running XP, 5 years after its end of life. Holy cow, man. That is amazing. I mean, I know there's some small municipalities out there that, okay, they do things a little different because budgets are tight. I get it. But still, you don't want people messing with your wastewater treatment plant. Your airport. I mean, that basically rendered your airport, your ATC, your air traffic control, your runway lighting setup, all that was now at the mercy of whoever could get on there if they had half a brain, which maybe they didn't. Still, just never a good idea. People expect to connect to their home Wi-Fi from anywhere. I work for a decent-sized WISP. Obviously, I am tech support. A customer of ours calls us and chews me out about how she hasn't had internet all week and we're a terrible company. I just take it and let her steam out. All the while, I bring up her billing and connect to her router to see what the issue is. She stops chewing me out, apologizes, and we move on. I can see she has a Ring doorbell and a few IP cameras and nothing else connected. I walk her through the process of connecting her phone to the Wi-Fi. She can't see the SSID though, so I ask her to power cycle her router. She then tells me, "Oh, I can't right now. I'm in Dallas seeing some friends. I'll be home tonight." At this point, I think I misunderstood her problem and shouldn't have zoned out while she ranted for 5 minutes. So I ask, "Is your problem that you can't connect your phone to the Wi-Fi or that you can't connect to your Ring?" She says, "No, my problem is that I can't connect to my home Wi-Fi right now. It always cuts out at the end of my driveway and I can never connect again until I'm home. I need you to come replace that router so it'll work." The remainder of that phone call was me trying to explain to her that no Wi-Fi router ever made at this point in time can or will connect to someone over 75 miles away. Yeah, again, it's amazing how many people don't understand the difference between Wi-Fi and data, or your home Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi at the McDonald's or whatever. Oh. The clock's wrong. Part of my work is for a small tertiary education institution in Sydney, Australia. About 10 years ago, I was tasked with setting up a new server for their instance of a popular open source learning management system, which we shall call OS/LMS for short. The new server was, like the old one, a Linux machine running the usual LAMP stack. Given that the Australian academic year runs within each calendar year, I was setting up the machine in late spring, November, so that it would be ready for use in the new year. Now, this institution's use of OS/LMS includes online submission of assignments in PDF form. Deadlines were always 11:55 p.m. Sydney time, and the mantra when talking to students was that the deadline was measured using server time, irrespective of their individual computer time. To assist with this, we had a plugin that displayed server time on every page on the web interface. In Sydney, daylight saving, summertime, is in effect from the first Sunday in October until the first Sunday in April. So when I set up and tested the server, it was summertime. Everything went well, the new server was working smoothly, and we migrated to it without a hitch. Then April rolls around. Daylight savings ends. Clocks are reset. Computers do the NTP thing and adjust their clocks to standard time. Then a colleague tells me, the server clock display on OS/LMS is still on summertime. Ah, crap. So I start digging. Server is set to the correct time zone and has done the NTP thing. So why is the server clock widget still showing summertime? Except that it isn't. The php.ini file has its own time zone setting, doesn't it? And that version of PHP had a default value of Antarctica/Macquarie. I think that's how you say it. Australia Eastern Standard Time is UTC plus 10. Antarctica/Macquarie is UTC plus 11. When I set up the web server, it was summertime, so I didn't notice the time zone error. Once I had set the PHP time zone to its correct value, Australia and Sydney, I moaned on Facebook, "Who on earth runs web servers in Antarctica?" A very learned friend replied, "The Penguins, and they're running Linux." Edit. Thanks for all the awards, I'm very flattered. Further note on the default time zone. I suspect that the choice of default is based on the lack of population living in that time zone. That would, in theory, mean you're more likely to notice and investigate. In my case, the complicating factor was daylight savings/summertime. So I learned something new today, boys and girls. I learned that in Australia they do daylight savings time just like we do here in the US. Even though their summer is opposite ours, so now their daylight savings is opposite, but whatever. It's kind of cool. And don't even start ragging about daylight savings time. I know you can't add actual daylight to the day. Sure, I'll take the desktop away. In 2019, we've upgraded all our desktops by replacing 7 or 8-year-old fat clients with Chrome boxes. It's worked pretty well. The screens and peripherals were still fine, so we only replaced the actual machines. In addition to these fixed setups, there's a lot of Chromebooks in use in each department. They were rolled out in 2019 as well, and are pretty much identical to the desktops. This week we got a ticket about a desktop. The complaint was, "This desktop is too old, we can't do anything with it anymore. Everything that we need to do works so much better on the Chromebooks. Please remove this old machine." Which frankly we did. No drama, no argument. It's really just a little funny that these devices being functionally identical to the Chromebooks are considered old and useless. Okay, I learned 2 things today. I also learned that there's such a thing as a Chrome box. Amazing. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. If you've enjoyed this content, do me a favor. Would you consider giving this video a like, subscribing to the channel, and maybe even clicking that little bell icon so you don't miss the fat guy with the beard telling you stories? See ya!